She went under the wheels.
How affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And today we're going to step back in time, talk about Steve Jobs, and also a little bit about news going on today and the Academy Awards post-mortem, which is going to come out significantly after the Academy Awards are done. Yeah. What an introduction. I feel like our introductions are getting simultaneously more concise, but also generically worse.
So does that mean the only way to turn it around is to have the longest possible introduction? And
Well, I don't
therefore
know.
it'll somehow be better?
That's my hope. I mean, I don't know how long I can string this one along because I've already, I did not bury the lead at all. It's
No.
right on Front Street. But yeah, let's just talk about. Let's do it the way that we normally do. Gabe, what have you been watching these last couple weeks? What's new?
Not much. I saw Highlander for the first time, and that's the most 80s movie ever. Holy shit.
I know, it is. It's amazing.
It's funny because there's a lot of cool filmmaking stuff in it. There's this great crane shot at the very beginning because the opening takes place at Madison Square Garden at a sold-out pro wrestling event, which, okay, very 80s. And there's a crane shot that swoops from the ceiling of the stadium all the way down to the ring where the wrestlers are performing their show. And then across the audience, back up all the way to the nosebleeds, and then it pushes way in on one nosebleed section. And the main character is sitting in complete darkness except for a really unnatural band of light right on his eyes. And I'm fuck me, if that isn't filmmaking, I don't know what is. But then at the same time, you have Christopher Lambert, who's French, playing a Scotsman with a French accent. Basically, he sounds like Tommy Wiseau.
A French-Scottish accent, it's really bad.
I know, and then you have Sean Connery, who's actually Scottish, playing a Spaniard in Scotland. You have all these really bad, politically incorrect jokes that would not only be hyper offensive right now, but you can't even tell that they're jokes. They almost seem just really bigoted statements. But you could kind of sense that in some parallel universe that they could be funny. There's a scene where it's just you walk into the police station and the police chief or whatever is some guy complained his Vietnamese neighbor ate his dog. And that's it. That's all he says. That's the entire joke. And it's weird because it's is that supposed to be funny? Because there's no setup to that. He just says it and then they move on with the scene. There's all these.
I don't even know where to go with that.
Neither do I.
I totally get why that would be seen as a joke. Because that movie's what, 86, I want to say?
85, 86, I think.
85, 86, okay.
And then there's
random Vietnamese joke.
I know, it makes no sense. And then there's there's a shitload of gay jokes too. That again, aren't even funny. They're just weird.
We should start by saying the entire movie of Highlander and the entire franchise of Highlander is just really weird.
Yeah, and then there's all these really bad special effects where guys are getting there's a shot of this really cool, Scottish Highland landscape, and it's all misty, and there's all these warriors standing, getting ready to kill each other. And then there's hand-drawn lightning across the sky. Yeah. It's so over the top and it's so corny, but in the best way. And then half the music is original songs from Queen. Way back in the past, Connor McLeod's wife dies of old age, but he doesn't age because he's immortal. And he walks out to bury her, and it's playing all this sad. It's playing the score, and the score is sad. And then suddenly, just Freddie Mercury starts wailing on top of it, and Brian May's guitar comes in, and you're what the fuck is happening? The best part about that movie, though, is fucking Clancy Brown, and God, I wish he was in it more because he's so good.
I know.
And I also like, there's a lot of bad ADR across the entire film, but I appreciate the fact that most of Clancy Brown's lines are ADR'd, because I feel like, with the mics we have, his voice doesn't sound as awesome as it normally does. So, like, they have him ADR his lines in the most badass way possible.
Highlander's incredible. And, like, you didn't even mention that Clancy Brown, like, it's so 80s because it's got, like, a lot of music, or a lot of original music by Queen. It starts with wrestling. Like, all of their outfits, they're all super 80s. And then Clancy Brown is just dressed as, like, a death metal rocker. He's dressed as a metalhead
when people were, like, this was a time period when people were legitimately scared of metalheads.
It's great. I didn't even realize when I first saw it, because it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I didn't realize when I first saw it was Clancy Brown until he started talking, and then I was like, wait, he sounds like Lex Luthor. Oh my god.
Wait, he sounds like Mr. Krabs.
It's also so weird because, like, it flashes back and forwards in time, and it's got, like, the perfect 80s visual effects, like you said, with like all of the hand-drawn lightning that was super popular post Star Wars.
Yeah.
And just like the concept of it is just so ridiculous. Like, they're immortal, but there can only be one final
immortal.
Yeah, and you have to, like, the only way you can defeat them is by cutting their heads off, and like and there were 3 sequels plus a TV show to this.
Yep.
Like,
it's also weird how like Connor McLeod, who's in the universe of this movie, because I know the sequels retcon the fuck out of the first movie.
I think to a degree they kind of do, but then the second one does something weird.
Yeah.
And then the third one retcons the second one.
Oh my goodness.
And then the TV show happened, and then they made a fourth movie that bridges Duncan MacLeod and Connor MacLeod.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing is, like, Connor MacLeod is, like, probably the youngest immortal in the first movie, because he's born in the 1500s, where everyone else is, like, at least 500 years older, if not more. But he definitely when he's in the 1980s storyline, he definitely comes across as, like, a man out of time. Like, he's lived for so long, and he's lived so many lives, he's completely disconnected from the particulars of any time period, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't speak in 80s slang, he doesn't really understand 80s culture, he's just sort of there. Whereas it's weird that the Kurgan, Clancy Brown's character, is like, he was raised in, like, a rat cage and fought dogs when he was a child, and he's like this animalistic warrior from 2,000 years ago. And he's lived an even longer, more insane life, but he's, like, perfectly at home in 1986. Like, he listens to all the popular music, he dresses the way everyone, like, all the, like an actual subculture does. Like, he's so totally 80s, and it's weird. Because, like, he should also be, like, this man out of time,
Right. You would think that he would, or...
untethered to the present moment, yet he's completely in the present.
He's like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, just like, oh yeah, I'm fine, just put me in the right clothes and I'll blend right in.
Yeah. Well, it's also just like he drives a car and listens to cassettes of music that is contemporary to the time period and loves it. And he quotes Def Leppard in a church. Like...
Oh my god, I haven't seen it in so long. I just remember watching it. I hated the fact that they had, like, the police procedural part of it. I was like,
oh, it's
get
so
back to
bad.
Guys murdering other people.
I know.
Like,
every character who's not Clancy Brown or Sean Connery sucks a bag of dicks in this movie. They're terrible and serve no purpose and should just get out of the way and get to all the good stuff.
Like, I understand that you want to communicate the plot to the audience, but not like that.
No.
Not like that.
Not like this.
Just have Clancy Brown, like, literally, well, because they basically just have Sean Connery tell the audience what's going on,
and he kind of does for a good chunk of the movie,
right? Because that's what happened. Like, because
he's
Connor MacLeod
guy.
Doesn't know why. Yeah. Oh, Sean Connery, his post James Bond career was really interesting. Thank God for The Last Crusade. Let's put it that way. Speaking of it, Sean Connery. So I have seen the first one, and I've seen bits and pieces of the TV show. I haven't seen the second or third or fourth, but apparently Sean Connery came back for the second movie.
Oh yeah, he comes back, I've heard. Also, remember the opening where there's a guy in a full suit doing backflips down a parking lot?
I can believe it. I remember that first fight takes place in a parking lot.
Yeah.
So yes, I can easily believe that.
There's a guy in a full suit, and he's like a middle-aged schlubby looking dude, picture the least athletic businessman possible in your mind, and then we're supposed to believe this guy is doing like 25 backflips in a row. Like, he's navigating the parking lot by backflipping, not by walking, okay? I was into the movie right up until that point, and I'm like, oh, this is what this movie is. I thought it was something else, but it's this.
No. Well, and it's weird because the movie does its hardest to make you as uninterested as possible. Like, at certain points, it's just like, isn't this movie amazing? But we're going to cut to this completely boring bullshit that no one cares about.
I know.
And then, hey, look, there's Sean Connery. Isn't this movie great? And then, oh no, it's more boring bullshit.
Yep.
Apparently, they were going to have a big dragon fight at the end of the movie, but they couldn't afford the VFX.
I'm not surprised.
They didn't have it in the budget.
They couldn't afford to draw the dragons.
Well, I mean, like, I don't even know how they would do it. I think they were going to try and do, like, an electric dragon, like the hand-drawn electricity.
Oh, made out of lightning from the signage that they're fighting on or something?
Yeah, something like that. Like, something where they could easily do it now, or even if they had waited, 10 years, they would have been able to kind of do it. But just the fact that was one of the things that they were thinking of for this movie. Yeah. It's a movie of potential, I feel like.
Oh, totally.
There's a lot of potential there.
But the fact that it's squandered somehow makes the movie better.
Definitely. I mean, I would rather them try and hit a home run and get
Are we back to using baseball metaphors again?
I think we're because it seems like they were really gearing up for that that 10-run home run, and they kind of just hit it a double, like a solid double, or maybe even a triple, or just one of those really awkward plays where the guy misses first base, has to run back to first, and they throw it away in an error, so he runs to second base and overshoots second base, so he has to go to third base, and then gets another error, and he somehow almost makes it home, and then he's thrown out at the plate. Something like that. I don't know if it's that.
They were trying to make the next Star Wars, and they really made Highlander.
They were trying to make the mature Star Wars that everyone wanted, and instead they hired Christopher Lambert's French accent to be Scottish. It's really weird. It's just so weird. It's baffling.
Ramirez, you crazy Spanish peacock. It's yes, the best Scottish accent I've ever heard. I also love how they constantly just crap on Sean Connery for being this flamboyant Spaniard.
Is that where all the gay jokes come in?
That's where half of them come in, I would say. Because basically Connor is just shouting gay slurs at Sean Connery every time he gets pissed, because Sean Connery wears earrings and dresses very fancy. And then I remember Clancy Brown calls him an effete snob at one point, where it's both of those words are too sophisticated for this movie. Ramirez was an effete snob. God, Clancy Brown's voice is so cool. He needs to be in every animated movie doing something, I swear.
I know. Clancy Brown, I feel like Clancy Brown should be the perfect villain in movies, but he's always a great villain in really shitty movies. Sometimes he's not even a great villain.
He's like Carl Urban. Carl Urban is he's a great bad guy, but he only has these big roles in fucking terrible movies. Priest.
Oh God, Priest. I think that's the second Priest mention we've had on this podcast.
Yeah, it is.
I was thinking about Priest. Well, it's weird. Of course, Carl Urban and Clancy Brown were both in Pathfinder, and Pathfinder was nigh unwatchable, and it's just really depressing because that should have been great, and it just wasn't.
No amount of alcohol I drank that night was able to make that movie palatable.
It was, yeah, that was bad. It's
Wasn't
weird.
There a 15-minute sequence where they're snowboarding on shovels or something? Or did I just imagine that?
God, I wish there was. I don't know. I don't remember half of that movie because I thought it was going to be Carl Urban killing a bunch of Vikings Seven Samurai style, but it turned into Carl Urban killing a couple of Vikings, and then they walk across the new world, and then some other shit happens. Yeah. And I don't remember it because I don't even remember finishing the movie.
We finished the movie though.
I believe we finished it.
We
I don't remember how it ends.
Yeah. I think there's they're climbing a mountain and there's a rope bridge and it's like one of those finales where it's a rope bridge fight. Oh, the other movie I saw was Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, which is amazing. That movie's incredible. Very, very, it's like a solid or maybe even a high shiny in chrome. It's really cool stylistically. Like, it looks really great, but like everything is shot in kind of like you're watching something you shouldn't be, you know?
Really?
Yeah, well, because like the whole movie's about surveillance, so a lot of scenes are shot or a lot of shots are set up where the actors are kind of far away from the camera. So it's like you're kind of watching them from across the room, or you're like watching them over someone's shoulder, or like when you do get close-ups, they always feel kind of uncomfortable, which is really interesting. You know, Gene Hackman does an amazing job. Like, his character is really fascinating, just because like you think it's going to be a very boilerplate thriller when it starts up, but his character's paranoid personality is actually what drives the plot, and not like plot shit, which is kind of neat. The way the movie uses sound is great. Like, Walter Murch is thrown all over the credits because he was the editor and sound designer. Or they say sound montage in the credits for this movie, because I guess that's the old-timey phrase for it.
No, I think they invented it for the movie.
But he's all over the credits for the movie, and he does a great job. And, you know, because the movie's all about like playing with audio and playing with different sounds and what you hear and what you don't hear and what you hear by mistake and stuff like that. There's a whole sequence where Gene Hackman goes to like a wiretapper convention, and all of it's really weird but funny, because it feels totally out of place in the movie. But again, Coppola manages to work it in to where it actually does like feed the plot as well.
Right.
Harrison Ford is the bad guy, which is great.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, dude! Now oh my god, I definitely need to watch this. Harrison Ford as a bad guy? That never happens.
And this is pre-Star Wars Harrison Ford. So like young Harrison Ford. I mean, not pre-Star Wars by much, but still pre-Star Wars.
Is it? It's after American Graffiti, I'm guessing, right?
I don't think so. I think American Graffiti was 1975. This was 1974. Let me check that though. Oh no, never mind. This was a year after American Graffiti.
Okay.
Graffiti was 73. And then what else? Oh, John Cazale's in it, because he's in every movie from the 70s.
Or every Coppola movie in the 70s.
Or just every movie in the 70s. I mean, he's in Deer Hunter too.
Yeah. Well, he was in 5 movies in total.
Really?
And
That's
it? Yeah, something. He was only in like 5 movies, and then like I think his girlfriend shot him or something.
Huh.
But yeah, because he's in both of the Godfather.
No, wait, I thought he
movies.
had cancer.
He might have had cancer. Dog Day Afternoon, where he gets. Yeah. John Cazale didn't have a really good well, I don't know about this movie, but I feel like John Cazale didn't have a great. His characters didn't have a great time in movies.
In this, he's just sort of there, you know.
Oh.
He plays Gene Hackman's assistant, who gets frustrated with Gene Hackman because Hackman's personality, because he's really paranoid. He's always afraid people are going to steal, or listening to him, are going to steal stuff from him, or because he builds his own surveillance technology, and he's always afraid people are going to learn his secrets and take them. And his job kind of runs into, it causes him to bump into a lot of unsavory characters, so he feels guilty about stuff that's happened in the past, and he doesn't want people knowing about it. So John Cazale plays his assistant, who eventually quits because he feels shut out of the business. Like he's like, I'm your assistant, but I'm not learning anything. It's a very millennial thing to do. It's like, I'm not growing in this role. I need to find opportunities elsewhere. And then the cherry on top is, there's so many cameos in movies today, and a lot of these cameos call attention to themselves. And I feel like back then you didn't really have that. Cameos were so under the radar. Mm-hmm. But Robert Duvall has a cameo in The Conversation, and when the first time he shows up on screen, the camera frames him in such a way that it's just saying, "Hey, look, it's Robert Duvall."
Just randomly there. I'm excited. Okay. This is moving to one of the top of my lists to watch The Conversation.
Well, and it's considered one of the greatest movies of all time, which I can understand why. Like, it's crazy it came out in the same year as The Godfather. Like, I don't know what kind of black magic deals with the devil Coppola was doing in the 70s to do what he did.
Was it the first one or the second one? I thought it came out with Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Godfather Part 2.
Okay.
So yeah, this movie and Godfather Part 2 came out in the same year. I actually don't like Godfather Part 2 that much, but this movie's fantastic.
I like The Godfather Part 2 a lot more than I originally did when I went and rewatched it, because I watched Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 back to back. And there's so much... I'm not surprised that Coppola was able to make another high-quality movie in 1974. I'm amazed that he was able to do two of them. So I'm really curious to watch The Conversation, because like Godfather Part 2 is like 100% polished, and I'm wondering if The Conversation follows suit.
I wouldn't say it's as like slick as Godfather Part 2. It's definitely a lot grittier and more rough around the edges. And I think Coppola plays around a lot more with, style and technique and stuff.
In The Conversation?
Yeah, in The Conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing he also made it on he had a decent budget, but probably compared to Godfather Part 2, pretty shoestring. Like I think this was his passion project.
Yeah, let me see. Well, the budget was $1.6 million in the 1974 dollars. For comparison, Godfather Part 2's budget was $13 million, so it was made for 1/7 the budget of Godfather 2.
Yeah, I'd say that's comparatively probably low to mid budget at that time. So he's like, I could use an extra $1 million, whereas people now are like, I could use an extra $10 million.
I know.
How much?
The Joker is a low budget movie.
Oh my god,
morons.
To put it into perspective, Taxi Driver was had a $1.9 million budget. So
that movie feels like it was financed with Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro's Coke money. Like, that movie feels like, hey, we got to do some crazy shit to make up for the fact that we've no money to make this.
It was just made with a string, some gum, and a whole lot of cocaine and a couple million feet of film. We don't know what to do. Just shoot it quickly. Shoot it quickly. AD's bearing on my back. Interesting. I do want to watch the Conversation. Especially Gene Hackman at that time was he was like the Philip Seymour Hoffman of that era. I feel like in the 70s.
Yeah.
Conversation, good stuff. All right. Yeah, you're right. Johnny Cazale died of lung cancer that metastasized to his bones. It's weird. Everyone's like, he's such an intellectual, and I'm like, I don't know. I know him as the idiot in every movie he played in.
I think maybe he was an intellectual in real life and an idiot on screen.
Yeah, but it's everyone's got fond memories of him, and I'm like, what? He's probably one of a very iconic character actor, and I can understand why he has a lot of respect from other people, but it's if I go on the street and say hey, it's that guy, they're gonna be like, who, you mean Fredo from The Godfather? Yeah.
I'm your older brother, Mike. I can do stuff.
I can do stuff too. What? Fuck everything up all the time? Jesus Christ.
Well, also, anyone who says I can do stuff probably can't do stuff.
Well, has Mo Green been beating you up? I can do stuff. Mo Green literally kicks your ass every day, dude. What can you do?
Don't you know who I am? I'm Mo Green. It's who the fuck is Mo Green? This is his first scene in the movie. I don't know who he is. Am I supposed to know who he is?
I didn't read the book. I shouldn't need to read the book to know who Mo Green is. And then he's the biggest part of The Godfather Part 2 for Michael's scenes. It's the whole thing revolves around Mo Green. This one character whose most iconic scene is the fact that blood pours out of his glasses.
I know.
Anyway.
So what have you been watching lately?
I went back and so I went and saw Bad Boys for Life because I needed to see a movie to make sure that my movie pass thing on AMC was valid. Actually, that's why I went.
It's called the sunk cost fallacy, Matthew.
Yeah, except I'd been meaning to go back and rewatch Bad Boys 2. So we both watch Patrick H. Willem's channel, right? Like that's safe to assume. So after watching his Michael Bay videos like twice, I really wanted to go back and rewatch Bad Boys 2. But what happened was I watched Bad Boys for Life because Will Smith and Martin Lawrence have good chemistry, and they do, and they still have really good chemistry. And I appreciate kind of like how, what's her name? Laura Dern's kind of having like a late career comeback. I don't think Martin Lawrence ever will have that, but I appreciate the fact that he's able to kind of like, he's basically like doing jobs to fund his retirement at this point. Like he was in Death at a Funeral, the American version, and like he was like a side character. He was supposed to be Chris Rock's brother, and I was like, isn't Martin Lawrence older than Chris Rock? Why is he playing his younger brother? But I appreciate the fact that Martin Lawrence is able to make fun of himself in kind of like, he's basically playing Murtaugh, but like a more over-the-top version, because he's just like, all I want to do is retire. All I want to do is retire. All I want to do is retire. But I don't feel like he's that much younger than Will Smith. But anyway, like the fact that he's able to make fun of himself in that way is entertaining, and it did actually make me go back and rewatch Bad Boys 1 and 2. Yeah,
dude, Martin Lawrence is older than Will Smith.
Yeah, but he's not that much older than Will Smith, right?
Oh yeah, he's like 3 years older.
Yeah, whereas in the movie it makes it seem like he's like 20 years older. They're like, I gotta retire, man. I gotta think about my family. I love God and all this stuff. It's also weird to watch Bad Boys 1 and then Bad Boys 3 because, like, apparently, like, Martin Lawrence was, like, super skinny in Bad Boys Part 1. And he's, like, pretty fun-sized in Bad Boys Part 3.
Fun-sized? You mean king-sized?
Yeah, king-sized. We'll go king-sized. Yeah.
Fun-sized is like...
Fun-sized is the small one.
Yeah, fun-sized candy is fun-sized because they're not fun at all. It's like...
They're trying to convince you by reading the label. It's fun,
boy,
I swear.
The world's tiniest Reese's cup. How fun.
Oh my god, I love having half a piece of Hershey's chocolate. It's weird because Bad Boys 3 is probably like the easiest of the Bad Boys movies to watch. It's pretty concise in its plot. And they got some good jokes in it, but it's very, like, it's pretty conventional. But yeah. I kind of miss the old Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson movies. Like, if you ever saw Enemy of the State, or, like, the Bad Boys movies, or, like, I think they produced True Romance and, like, the Tony Scott movies. They had, like, a formula for some of these, like, movies with, like, government programs and, like, how they get the movies rolling. Like, if you had seen what was it, the Will Smith movie from last year where they make a clone of him.
Oh, Gemini Man?
Yeah, Gemini Man.
Dude, you saw it. How have you already forgotten the name?
Dude, because it's like the name is that forgettable. It felt like there was a very 90s feel to the entire movie of Gemini Man. And I kind of miss that in movies these days. Like the whole like, hey, you're a soon-to-be retired military, like ex-assassin military guy, and you're getting your mission from a very long retired ex-assassin military guy who lives on a boat. Like the whole movie kind of like the whole movie kind of feels like a 90s Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson thing, and like it was kind of nice. It's kind of nice that there've been a couple of movies that have kind of brought that back.
Yeah, but, well, according to the timeline of most nostalgia cycles, we should be entering a period of 90s nostalgia right about now.
I know, I'm really looking forward to to like Super Nintendo purple and gray everywhere, and like beige being the requisite color of everything. So.
Just wait, all the music in the next season of Stranger Things is going to be Nirvana.
Probably. Well, we kind of have already hit that with like everyone's obsession with like boy bands coming back, and like, oh yeah, Backstreet Boys is back again, and like NSYNC remember when we liked NSYNC? Bring back Joey Fatone. Like, it's
I don't
kind of
think
already
boy bands ever really went away, or like boy bands were never not a thing. Like the Beatles were a fucking boy band.
Well, I would say the Beach Boys are closer to that, and like I wonder if nostalgia cycles for boy bands are like slightly more accelerated than culture, because like the Beach Boys were like gone, like they were like, oh, 50s is great, 60s is okay, and then they kind of reinvented themselves in the 70s and 80s a little bit. But I don't know. Going back quickly to Bad Boys, have you seen any of them?
No.
I think the second one is the only one really worth watching. But it's weird to see like there's not much to talk about Bad Boys 3. It was fine, the action was okay. It was the most concise of the movies.
Who directed it? Because I'm assuming it's not Michael Bay.
It's not, although Michael Bay has a really funny, like, super self-indulgent cameo. It was directed by these two Belgium directors, and it's their first U.S. movie.
Okay.
And so it's missing some of the stylized, like some of the hyper-kinetic stylization of Michael Bay's movies, but the trade-off is that it's a lot more, like, you can sit down and watch it without really, like, what's the word? It doesn't feel like your brain is on oversaturation overload and like hyperkinetic overload the whole movie. It's better balanced than that.
Speaking of hyperkinetic overload, have you ever seen Man on Fire?
I've seen a lot of Man on Fire. I think I've watched the whole thing maybe once.
That movie hurts my eyes and my brain.
I think that's when color correction, like digital color correction and DTIs were like really starting to become a thing in Hollywood, because everything is like super oversaturated.
Well, not only is it super oversaturated, but the entire movie is cut to hell. And then, like,
so bad.
It's like they took all the reels of film that they shot, threw it in a tree shredder, and then like blew the clippings with a leaf blower onto a giant board covered with glue so that they just stuck wherever they landed. And then just ran that through a projector, and that's the movie.
Like, we talk about things that are overcut today, and like how like especially television shows you can watch that are like super overcut. Man, they have nothing on Man on Fire. Like,
oh no,
Denzel Washington is trying to say one word, and like there's like 3 different cuts for him saying like hello. Like, it's just,
and one of the cuts is like an inanimate object or something.
Yeah, or like a close up of his shoe. Like,
it's like a close up of like a smoldering like leftover cigarette on the ground.
It's like he just like looks and peers his glasses down, and it takes like 4 cuts, including one like super close up of the reflection of his glasses. Tony Scott started getting like super bonkers in the editing room near the end of his career.
Well, I mean, look, if that's the way that he, like, if life on Earth felt like that to Tony Scott, I mean, no wonder he killed himself. Jesus. Like, I mean, that movie it's painful.
That one's
really
painful.
is.
Domino is painful. It's weird though, because I didn't see Taking of Pelham 123, but I did see
Unstoppable.
The one that's it's basically a math problem. In movie form.
It's Chris Pine and Denzel Washington fight a train, the movie.
If train A leaves Saskatchewan at 8:45 and train B is trying to meet there, and you give Chris Pine and Denzel Washington a train in which they can destroy it with. No, it's...
Yeah. I'll give credit where credit is due. That movie looked so stupid, but I actually caught a good chunk of it on TV. It's entertaining. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Scott can make an entertaining piece of media when he's kind of tempers himself down a little bit more.
Yeah, he toned himself down quite a bit, I feel like, for Unstoppable.
Well, it's also, like, Unstoppable is also kind of a strange movie, because it's like these 2 movie stars attempting their hardest to play everyman, and they do a really good job. Mm-hmm. Like, but they start off like in the beginning of the morning when like Chris Pine is waking up and like he's all creaky because he's been working the same job for years and years or whatever. Although I think that's his first day on the job.
Speaking of movies that are about people fighting, like inanimate things using other inanimate things. Apparently that movie San Andreas, where The Rock fights an earthquake with a helicopter, apparently that's getting a sequel.
You mean the movie starring Alexander Daddario, who has a father who fights an earthquake, also known
With
as
a helicopter?
Yeah, also known as The Rock versus the World.
Yes, that movie.
I'm amazed at some of the people who are able to get like a lot of money for sequels. Obviously, you know, The Rock basically sells movies on his name alone. But
Which
like,
is crazy because he's the worst. But
oh, I would almost agree with you, but at least he's putting out like different material. I mean, like, not that any of it's amazing, because like Skyscraper, it's fun, you know. It's like,
dude,
it's there.
The Rock's pro wrestling matches had better plots than his movies do.
I'll say this one thing about The Rock's movies: like when he has to play a guy who's married to someone, whoever they get to be his wife is always like an actress that I've liked previously, and I'm glad she's still getting work. Like, it was like, I was like, oh hey, Neve Campbell's in this. Oh, that's great. Or like, hey, Carla Gugino's his wife. That's great. I'm glad she's still getting work. You know, like whoever he gets to cast his wife is usually really good. And like, to their credit, like, you know, they make it look like, oh yeah, it's, you know, it's they like him, they're in love with him. Yeah, good job. So it's like the Jean-Claude Van Damme theory. It's like, wait, no, not Jean-Claude. It's the Keanu Reeves theory, where he always surrounds himself with much better casts so that it makes the rest of his movie better. But, you know, Bad Boys 2 is such a weird... Going back to Bad Boys. Bad Boys 2 is such a weird movie, but it's, like, still really well done. And Michael Bay, I know he gets a lot of flack for his objectification of women, but for a guy who objectifies women so much, he has a very... The women in his movies are all, like, have really strong personalities for the most part. And it's weird that for a guy who objectifies women so much, there's not a lot of female nudity in his movies.
Well, because Michael Bay, more so than he is about the ladies, he's about the money. And rated R movies don't make money.
Except Bad Boys 2 and Bad Boys are both R-rated movies.
That's true.
So I mean, there's one scene that's really bad where like there's like a cadaver that has huge breasts, but it's kind of funny. But like, but the whole time I'm watching Bad Boys 2, I'm like, yeah, I can see what Patrick Willems means by like, this is a movie where Michael Bay just hates everyone. But it's got some of the most stylish, like really cool special effects. Like there's a lot of the sort of invisible camera effect, or the omnipotent camera where it can just go anywhere. And like, I feel, which was like a very David Finchery thing, and I feel like we've kind of lost that in movies these days. So it's kind of fun seeing that back. Yeah, but that's basically that's pretty much what I've been watching. I also saw Birds of Prey, or the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, aka
that's not
Harley
the title
Quinn,
anymore.
Birds of Prey. I know. That's really the main reason I wanted to bring it up. They changed the title because they're like, hey, this is a movie about Harley Quinn, but we're calling it Birds of Prey for the 8 people who read Birds of Prey. Like, it was the action scenes are actually really good in it, and the movie's really over the top. And like, for example, Ewan McGregor gets to cut somebody's face off. Like,
whoa!
Like, it's a hard R, and it's a very well deserved hard R. I got a lot of enjoyment out of it. It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. But caveat, if you find Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn annoying, then do not watch it.
You know, the weird thing, maybe I'll see it so we can talk about it on the next episode. But
if it's still in theaters.
Yeah, if it's still in theaters. The thing with Margot Robbie is like, on paper, she is the perfect actress to be playing Harley Quinn. And yet, her Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad was like, it was fine.
Well, so I agree with you. I think that Margot Robbie, like, she starts off pretty good in Suicide Squad, but then by the end, I'm kind of like annoyed and tired of her. Yeah. It doesn't quite get to that level in this movie, but my God, they are really trying to write Jared Leto out of this DC universe.
Good for them.
Yeah, good for them. It is, but it is crazy. Like, they write every scene they write around having the Joker appear, or if they need the Joker to appear, it's a cartoon version that looks more like Cesar Romero than it does like Jared Leto. Yeah. It also makes fun of all of the cop cliches, like what's her name, Montoya, the cop, like is basically every single cop show you've ever seen in a movie, and they make fun of it the entire time.
That's great.
So yeah, it's got a style all its own. I liked it. You'd probably find it as fine. It's like a high fine, maybe a low witness, because it goes in some really like fun and fucked up places. But yeah, that's what I've been watching.
Cool.
You didn't watch the Academy Awards, did you?
No, what was I doing?
Something more productive.
Something, yeah. I don't remember what it was, but I wasn't watching that.
I was not going to watch the Academy Awards. I was like, I've got other things I have to do. I don't need to watch it. I can just catch up on the Academy Awards via the internet. But it's funny because it's like the Academy voters the Academy nominees got everything wrong. And then the Academy voters kind of got everything right.
Or at least given the options they had to work with.
Exactly, yeah. Although, if 1917 had won Best Picture, I would not have been disappointed. But having Parasite win is a nice sort of like tribute. It was nice. It was nice having Parasite win. But yeah, I agree. But just quickly, I have no idea why Brad Pitt won.
No, neither do I. What did he do?
I think it's his Lifetime Achievement Award. Like, I don't think anyone else was like good enough on the nominated list, and they're just like, let's just default to Brad Pitt. But he won every single award leading up to it too, which is what was weird.
Okay, yeah, looking at who was nominated with him, yeah, it's not a very like competitive crop. Who
else was nominated?
Tom Hanks, Anthony Hopkins. Why is The Two Popes getting so much attention, first of all? Is it actually good, or is it just like a brain fart from the Academy?
So the clips that they would instead of showing like isolated clips when they read their names, like Brad Pitt, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then like Brad Pitt like peeing in a pool or something, they had this montage of all of the actors acting, and then they read out every person's name. Like what? Why? We can see their names. Like, why all of the formalities like that? But Best Supporting Actor, Tom Hanks. Oh, and that's what I was going to say. The Two Popes. Every single shot they had of it looked like Michael J. Fox was holding the camera in the movie. So like, I don't know what they were going for in The Two Popes, but they're like, this is the story of two popes transitioning, and it's done in like Paul Greengrass's style.
So he was not nominated against anyone particularly noteworthy, it seems like. So I guess it's fine if he won. But
I mean, there's one huge omission there. Like, we really didn't need both Al Pacino and Joe Pesci nominated.
But we
for The Irishman.
Willem Dafoe.
We needed Willem Dafoe. But then if he lost, which he inevitably would have probably lost, it would have just been that much more crushing.
I don't know. At least he would have got a nomination. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Laura Dern's win was nice.
Yeah.
They kept cutting to Florence Pugh the whole night. I'm
just glad Parasite won a bunch, because
Me too.
That was like the one movie other than 1917 that was kind of lending some respectability to this whole affair. Yeah,
well, that and Ford v Ferrari. Like, I'm happy for all of the nominations that Ford v Ferrari won. Like, totally deserved editing. What else did it win? Fuck, I don't even remember what it won. The one thing you did miss by not watching it live was after Bong Joon-ho won for Best International Feature, he like gave this great speech that you would get when you won Best Picture. And so you're like, okay, well, he clearly thinks he's done winning for the night. And then he wins Best Director, and he comes up on stage and he's like, wow, I thought I was done winning awards for the night. And so he has nothing planned. So he starts talking about, he's less like, man, I grew up on the movies of Martin Scorsese. God, he's so good. oh man, I grew up on the films of Quentin Tarantino. Man, he was amazing. Oh, Todd Phillips, you make good movies too. And Sam Mendes, you were pretty good too. We all deserve it. If I could split this Oscar into five, so him winning was just like a nice. It was nice. It was fun to see him win because he just looked like he like really loved winning the awards. He was genuinely surprised the whole night.
I know. I think a lot of people were surprised just because I think most people, or a lot of people, had not heard of Parasite, number one. Number two, didn't expect it to win because it's a Korean movie. Right.
It's the first, they say it's the first international film to win. Now, I don't know if that means it's also the first foreign language film to win.
That's what they mean. It means it's the first film not in English to win.
Which, Life is Beautiful, was that...
in English, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, I was going to say, was that just nominated?
Well, it's in multiple languages, including English, I guess.
Because that would be the only other one I was thinking. I was like, what about that Roberto Benigni movie where like they turned the Holocaust into a screwball comedy?
You mean Jojo Rabbit?
Which I still haven't watched.
Neither have I. All the trailers for Jojo Rabbit make that movie look so on the nose in terms of its social commentary.
Yeah.
That I just had no desire to see it.
Well, I'm curious. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I don't want to really see something that's that obvious.
Yeah, I'm not particularly interested in that movie at all either. But I am curious to see what Jerry Seinfeld has to say about that movie. After all, he came out and he was like, "Oh, I can't do comedy. Like, we can't do comedy anymore on college campuses because kids are too quote woke or whatever." But like,
which is weird coming from Jerry Seinfeld because all his style of comedy is like, what's the deal with the cardboard they give you in your coffee cups?
What is he saying on college campuses that are making people like retaliate against him?
I don't know.
He's not that controversial to begin with.
I know. Well, maybe he's like transitioned from jokes about scissors to jokes about like
scissoring.
I don't know. Huh?
Jokes about. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Jerry Seinfeld is doing. I know Chris Rock is the same though. He's like, I can't go on college campuses because I can't, make jokes. I'm like, what? Really? So, it was also kind of funny that like everyone was posting about how Todd Phillips was like, oh, I can't make comedies anymore because everyone's too insensitive. And then like the movie that wins Best Adapted Screenplay is this like movie where they're making fun of like kids who idolized Adolf Hitler. It's like, that was fun for the internet. But otherwise, the Academy Awards, kind of boring, but yeah. But some fun to be had there. Speaking of people who have been snubbed continually at the Academy Awards, let's talk about Alex Garland for a second.
Oh, yeah. Alex Garland is a new TV show, which, like, I'm excited because he's awesome and all his stuff makes no money for some reason.
I know, it's frustrating.
What's weird, too, is, like, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Ex Machina or Annihilation. Like, I've heard people say, like, oh, Annihilation isn't amazing, but it's good.
Wait, really? Oh, yeah. Okay.
I haven't heard anyone say it's bad. And I've definitely never heard anyone say anything bad about Ex Machina. But his movies make absolutely no money. And no one goes to see them. And he's like a pariah, apparently. So now he's got a mini-series coming out on Hulu starring Sonoya Mizuno, who's the lady from Ex Machina and Maniac.
Oh, okay.
So I have no idea what it's about. Nick Offerman's in it as well as a evil CEO or something. So we'll find out. I don't have Hulu, which is a problem, so I'll have to figure out what to do.
Wait for the whole series.
I'm not paying for that shit. Yeah, wait for the whole series to come out, get a free trial, watch it, cancel the free trial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested. It's weird because I'm surprised it took him so long to get to TV because it seems like it would be a natural fit for him because he's used to kind of limited budgets and he's got really good ideas and kind of that's where people like people who have both of those go to TV because they're like, I need more control over my projects. But it's weird. It feels like he should have been really popular in the 90s. Like, that's where he would have that's where he would have been, like, perfect, because he does have these, like, really good concepts for sci-fi, and I feel like no one watches science fiction anymore, whereas it was a huge genre in the 90s, which is why Will Smith did sci-fi.
Yeah, well, you know that, speaking of the 90s, I mean, Alex Garland used to be a novelist, and his one novel was The Beach, which came out in the 90s.
The Beach, directed by Danny Boyle and starring Leonardo DiCaprio, which would make a really easy segue.
Exactly. That The Beach was based on Alex Garland's one of his 3 novels. But yeah, apparently The Beach was a huge deal back in whenever the fuck it came out. And then it was adapted into a movie.
That's interesting. Did you see The Beach?
No.
I haven't either. I think I started trying to watch it, but I just couldn't. I was like, I don't know what's going on in here. God, I don't know. I almost want to read it now. Oh, it's only 491 pages. Oh, good. That'll be a light read. I don't know. I'm happy. I kind of wish that, he would make enough money so that he could put out Dread 2 and 3, but I'll take a TV series from him. Especially Hulu's one of those platforms that loves throwing a shit ton of money at a project and hoping that it turns out good.
Yeah.
So, I'm down for that. That sounds exciting and engaging,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it, but but I didn't know anything about Annihilation either. Like, I'm almost ready to just kind of go all in whatever he's working on, just because I know it's going to be at least somewhat cerebrally interesting. So
yeah, I mean, he's 2 for 2 in my book, and I love Annihilation to death. So
yeah,
I'll watch whatever he puts out there, one way or another.
Well,
and Dread is just great.
Yeah, Dread's so good. I'm wondering if he's going to direct every episode, though, or if it's going to be one of those things where, like, he establishes the look of the show and then he brings other people in to do it.
I don't know. I hope he directs every episode. I like TV shows that are like that are usually better than the ones that aren't.
I know. I like that too. I like having sort of like the visual consistency and also like the sort of like control on set of just one person over it.
Yeah.
Well, that speaking of Alex Garland and The Beach, directed by Danny Boyle, should we talk about Steve Jobs?
Sure.
All right. See, I'm kind of nervous because I want to get your rating, but also I don't know if we should just talk about the movie in general first. And again, to be clear, we're talking about Steve Jobs starring Michael Fassbender, not Jobs starring Ashton Kutcher, which I have never seen. And probably never will see. Yeah. It's just going to make me depressed.
It's funny because I never had very much interest in Steve Jobs, but you and Austin would always talk about how it's like it's so amazing and you could watch it just on a loop forever and ever and ever. And I'm like, really? Steve Jobs?
So let me clarify.
Just a movie where people talk for 2 hours?
Let me clarify. I don't know if Austin feels that way, but that's exactly how I feel.
Oh, no. Austin has gone on at length about how much he loves Steve Jobs.
Okay. So with that in mind, how did you feel when you saw it?
I thought it was pretty good. I was surprised because I was worried I was going to be bored out of my mind because it is just a movie of people talking for 2 hours, talking in Aaron Sorkin hyperspeed for 2 hours. And It's also like Aaron Sorkin's one of those writers who can make all his dialogue sounds really cool, but he has this ability to make even the most mundane moments feel super contrived. What
do you mean by that? What do you mean by make it feel super contrived?
Like every conversation feels like this epic battle for to wow the audience, and you go, whoa, that was so epic.
Yeah.
And It's like you don't you don't need to do that. Like it's just it gets annoying at a certain point when every third line said by Michael Fassbender has like a musical swell behind it. To
so
sell
funny.
it like extra hard, or something, or like, every 2 minutes in the middle of a conversation, which is the entire movie, because the movie is nothing but conversations, is like this dramatic turning point. I don't know. It's a good movie, but it's also so weird because it's like.
So we'll break it down a little bit. Let me start by
Yeah.
getting your rating for it.
I would say it's a high witness, low shiny and chrome territory.
All right, for me, it's a high shiny and chrome, it's almost a perfect movie. Yeah, and I'll be happy to go into it because I've been wanting to talk to someone about it for so long. So to your first point that actually you didn't really point out, but you were talking about the musical cues. Did you pay attention to the music in the movie? And if so, did you like the music in the movie?
For the most part, yes. It's just the the atmospheric music I thought was really good, especially like that kind of bubbly techno type soundtrack that they have going on.
Yeah.
For like when there's not a whole lot dramatic that's happening, they'll kind of have it simmering in the background, and that gives the movie this very like nice kind of snappy feel to it. Because the other thing the movie seems to be really concerned about is speed. Like the movie has to keep going and stay lively because it is 2 hours of talking, and they don't want it to slow down, otherwise people will just get bored. So the music helps a lot in that respect. I think just the parts where I get annoyed are when each conversation has 3 plot twists. So whenever there's a new plot twist, there's like a musical swell behind. It's like ba-da-da-da. And Michael Fassbender says like some really complex
Technobabble.
Fuck you technobabble really fast, and then whoever he's talking to is like, oh my gosh, I'm an utter fool, what a waste of a human being I am to think that I, dumb sack of shit ape man, could have stood toe to toe with Steve Jobs, the greatest man ever. Like there's a little too much of that for my taste, but yeah, I like the music.
I agree that there's a lot of like these moments where it's supposed to be like, oh man, you just got owned by Steve Jobs. At the same time,
that's the perfect way of putting it.
But at the same time, I find it like oddly satisfying that every moment they have of that in the first 2/3 of the movie, in the last third, it's basically just like Steve Jobs getting owned by everyone else. Like but like the music, it's funny because like I feel like Aaron Sorkin's dialogue goes best with music that's like super techno heavy, because you have like The Social Network, it worked really well.
So here's the question though: is that true, or is that just recency bias because of Social Network and Steve Jobs?
It's
because
recency
The West Wing
bias.
didn't have any techno music in it, and that's ultra snappy.
Yeah, it's I think it's recency bias, but I also think it's like it's a design principle thing too, because like The West Wing, one of the things I loved about The West Wing was that like almost everything was done in like really long takes. So like the actors had to be on point. And so in that case the music could have that sort of like high mythic quality. But then this latter half where it's like a lot of the story beats and dialogue and movies that are written by Sorkin lately have been driven a lot by editing and sort of like digital or manipulation in After Effects to make the dialogue lines faster using different cuts of things. The techno music has helped a lot more because I like Moneyball, but I feel like Moneyball is not one of those Sorkin scripted movies where I'm like, oh, this is one I'll always go back to. Like, it's not like as good as A Few Good Men. It's not as good as The Social Network or Molly's Game or Steve Jobs. It's, it's like, it feels more of like a director, screenwriter did not mesh fully in a weird way.
Which is weird because I love Moneyball.
I love Moneyball a lot, but I don't go back to it a lot because it doesn't if anything, Bennett Miller was able to take a lot of the Steve Jobsiness, the Aaron Sorkin-iness, and like adapt it to his own style. But it doesn't. But it's like I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Wilson's War either. And so like those are two movies where I feel like normally Sorkin's scripts sort of take over a movie, and those are two where I feel like Aaron Sorkin's scripts were not used really well.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Bennett Miller is he's got a very like slow, methodical style.
Yeah, agreed.
Whereas Danny
Sorkin's
Boyle, well, Aaron Sorkin is, Mr. chain smoking, like crazy on caffeine and nicotine,
and sometimes
style
Coke.
Of dialogue, and sometimes Coke. Style of dialogue. So like the perfect director for his type of stuff is someone like Danny Boyle, whose two most famous movies are 28 Days Later and Trainspotting. Those two are, I think, are a match made in heaven.
Yeah, well, it's the same, but see, like I wouldn't exactly call Fincher a guy who's known for making like hyperkinetic movies either, or movies that have to have like that are really fast and snappy. Like he's kind of more the slow burn kind of guy.
Well, he's a slow burn kind of guy in terms of plot, but the way he edits and directs his movies, they're a lot faster than they feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like if you want, the way Fincher always shoots dialogue is, he does like 125 takes of whatever the scene is from 236 different angles, and then cuts between all of them depending on like the hierarchy of who has the most power in the scene at this moment right now.
Right.
And that, because he's cutting so much across so many different angles, and he's cutting on words, he's cutting on motion and things like that, I think that works really well with Sorkin's snappy script. So even though Fincher's movies tend to feel very slow burn, his actual directing and editing is much faster than I think we sometimes realize. Maybe.
The other thing I was going to say is like with The Social Network, what he would do is it would still be like a lot of the moments were still kind of like slow burn moments, and kind of like in this movie, how it's all like building to a crescendo, and so he would still be using the dialogue to help build it to that crescendo. So even though the dialogue is snappy, he is able to sort of adapt Sorkin's script to his style while still keeping Sorkin's script as rapid fire as possible, but kind of like melded into his style, which is what I feel like Danny Boyle does here. If I could even say that Danny Boyle has a style, which I'm still not sure I can even pinpoint, to be honest. Because
Danny Boyle's style is shoot everything pretty conventionally and then cut to a really bizarre canted angle every now and then.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because like, what about Slumdog Millionaire? But I mean, like because like I watched yesterday, and I'm like, there's very little there's a very strange line, if there is even a line, that you can draw from something like Trainspotting or 28 Days Later or Sunshine or Slumdog Millionaire to something like Yesterday, or even to this. So like he's kind of a strange filmmaker who takes on really strange projects, which is why it's kind of a shame that he's not doing the next Bond movie. But I'll try and keep that as low as possible. But
also, speaking of one side note on the next Bond movie, I know there's a lot of talk of like who's going to be the next James Bond now that Craig is out. Why has Michael Fassbender's name never been thrown out there? Because I feel like he's like the of course he's the obvious choice kind of choice,
I've never even thought about it.
What?
Yeah, I know it sounds weird. I've never even thought about it. I don't know. To me, he seems too like prestige-y actor, I guess. Maybe that's the problem they're having.
Maybe,
like,
I don't know.
Like a lot of the guys that they're throwing around aren't necessarily like that high profile, right?
Yeah.
Aside from maybe like Idris Elba, which is more like the press throws it around.
Well, Idris Elba would have made a great Bond like 20 years ago.
So right around the time that Daniel Craig was Bond. God.
Exactly. Well, I mean, the only problem with Idris Elba as Bond is that he's old as fuck.
He is, and yet he keeps doing these movies where he's playing like an old guy doing young man stunts.
I know. It's just like the guy's got gray hair. He's too old to play Bond. I'm sorry. You kind of missed the boat.
It's weird because like I feel like I ended up seeing the Downton Abbey movie, and one of the what?
I said ew.
Well, I enjoyed the series. I was actually another really quick aside. It was weird that the Downton Abbey movie, which is like the most English property ever, was directed by an American. It just was weird to me to find out. But one of the actors in it, I feel like he would actually be a good James Bond, and it felt like the Downton Abbey movie was his like demo reel to show Barbara Broccoli to try and get the James Bond role. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that.
Barbara Broccoli sounds like a character in a children's book.
More so than Cubby Broccoli.
Is that a real person?
That's what it's Albert Broccoli.
There's a guy named Albert Broccoli? What the fuck?
Wait, dude, Albert Broccoli's the producer of the first like 10 James Bond movies.
That's hilarious.
He's the guy who owns Eon Productions. Yeah, Albert Broccoli. They called him Cubby Broccoli.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, Barbara Broccoli sounds more like a children's book character because it's alliterative.
It is, yeah. Or like a superhero.
Oh god, yeah, she's a Marvel superhero because they all have alliterative secret identities. You know, it's like Peter Parker, Bruce Banner.
Oh, Steve Rogers.
Captain Producer, aka Barbara Broccoli.
She's gonna be here to ruin your favorite. No, I'm just kidding. She's actually done a pretty decent job with James Bond.
I was gonna say she's made pretty good choices so far.
Yeah. Well, it's this is gonna become the James Bond cast. It's weird because like back in the like the 90s when you could make mid-budget movies, James Bond was like the definition of recurring mid-budget movie. But as we've had this sort of like hyper escalation of budgets in movies, and like every movie has to be, you know, like a box office tentpole. Now all of a sudden they're in this weird territory where like every single James Bond movie that comes out has to have the stakes of like a high tentpole movie and be priced accordingly, and so they have to have like all of the visual effects have to be perfect, whereas like James Bond has historically had some pretty shitty visual effects.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of weird that like James Bond is like, especially when they got Sam Mendes to do it, it kind of shifted to like a prestige-y type of blockbuster movie. But like I worry about James Bond as a franchise because they can only come out with the movies every like 5 years because they've got to incubate them so that they're not going to just utterly fail because they have to throw a shit ton of money at them. So
yeah.
James Bond's in a very weird phase where who knows in the future, like it might just be a movie that's on Netflix because Netflix is like, yeah, I'll give you $50 million to do this movie. So it'd be weird if that happened. But
it'd be really fucking weird.
As the budgets go up, more studios have to pitch in money to them. So
I feel like there has to be an upper limit to how high the average movie budget can go, though, because it's at a certain point it's just not sustainable, and someone's gonna have a big flop that tanks the entire studio.
I agree. It just feels a lot like history repeating itself in the 60s. You know, with like the movie musical boom that happened, and like Cleopatra bankrupting MGM, and like all of these sword and sandals epics that like the studios were just throwing a bunch of money into on like more and more elaborate sets, which the money that they put in at that time was seen on screen in like physicality. Now a lot of the money they put in is for like visual effects and like big named actors and stuff. I agree with you, it's not sustainable. I'm not sure which studio it's going to happen to, but I have a feeling it's not going to be Disney. I feel like Disney's like insulated itself so well that even if one of their $250 million budget movies fails, they're still going to have like a cash reserve in the upwards of like $500 billion to play with, just because we can't stop giving them money.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone goes to see Aladdin and then complains about how bad it is, and it's like, well, why did you go see it? I know I'm guilty of going to see it, but at least I skipped out on Lion King and basically everything else they put out.
Right. Well, which puts me in a weird position where I feel like I want to support movies that are good, and I do go to movies that are good, but also studios that I like or studios that I feel like should get my money. I'll go and see a movie that's not necessarily good for them. And again, I have the AMC Stubs Pass, so I pay $25 and I can see 3 movies a week every week. So like me going to see their movies, as long as I don't buy concessions or anything like that, it's not affecting me, but it's helping another studio's bottom line. So like if I can help Universal, which is kind of weird to say, it's like, oh, I want to help Universal who's literally killing themselves, or like Warner Brothers Studios who's like literally shooting themselves in the head. Like all of these studios are just going through practices that just don't make any sense. But if I want to have more variety than just Disney, then you have to go and like spread it around and see things that you hope are good, or hope that even if they're not necessarily in your range, if they're like if they've been kind of like well received as movies, you take a chance on it and maybe you discover something great. But but anyway,
man, fuck Disney,
dude. The movie, it's weird because it's like I really shouldn't care that much about the media monopoly or the coming media monopoly, because it's not one yet. But like it affects so much about our lives that we just don't really realize in such subtle ways.
But yeah, back to Steve Jobs.
Yes.
I also, the other thing that I really like about the movie is I like the structure of it. That's probably my favorite part of the movie. Like it's really unusual in that, like, for a movie based on real life people and real life events, to be that obviously not close to reality whatsoever is a pretty bold choice. And it's interesting that Steve Jobs has four important conversations with the same 4 people 3 times in 3 different time periods right before 3 different major product launches.
Right.
And then it ends with the product launch about to start, and they don't show the actual launch itself, which I think is a good choice because all that information is like publicly available. Like you can just go watch those things on YouTube,
Right.
So you don't need to recreate those. And I also kind of like the idea of it ending in 1998, which I know, I think that caused some controversy because like everyone's like, well, Steve, they completely ignore everything Steve Jobs did ever after 1998. I'm like, yes, they did, because it's not important. No. This movie's not about Steve Jobs. It's about the character of Steve Jobs.
Well, it's not about it. It's weird because like I think if people are like, oh, but I wanted to see him talk to these same people at the launch of the iPod or like the launch of like the iPhone, it's like, yeah, but you're missing the point. The point is this is the critical moment where he gets the reins of Apple back, and he's already commented on like, oh, you're okay. People who are upset because it doesn't focus on things that happen afterwards, why would it? It wouldn't need to. He already made a comment about how he's going to invent the iPod. He already made a comment about how he's going to invent the iPhone. He's already made the iMac. We don't need to see how he makes the iBook.
Yeah.
It's not like his philosophy changed in those 12 years. Well,
the other thing that's crazy is people are like, the movie portrays Steve Jobs as so mean, but I knew him, and he was much nicer, especially later in life. It's like, well, that later in life isn't in the movie.
Right.
First of all. Second of all, like, you don't need to show anything after, because like the major
foundation of the character,
the major transformation of the character for the purposes of this movie is complete by the end. So you don't need to go any further. Like he was an asshole, and then at the end of the movie he's less of an asshole. And that's his arc. That's the movie.
How did I miss that?
Yeah.
I hope that's what a lot of people say after they're like, why didn't they do this? Like, why would they need to? They doesn't have to. Yeah. The sculpture on time. The sculpture on time. How did you miss that?
I know. There's so much like, oh, I thought I had a good point, but I just got owned by Steve Jobs. I'm such a moron. And then Steve Jobs gets owned by the Polish woman,
Yeah.
who does a very good job. Like, all the acting in this movie is great.
It's great.
And it's also crazy just how much verbiage they have to chew through.
Yeah, especially like Kate Winslet has the hard job of doing it in a Polish accent.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think Austin said, or maybe you said, but like Michael Fassbender had a hard time doing an American accent, which always makes me laugh a little bit every time he's like, it's the Mac. It's the Mac. Like the way he says Mac, he's like, it's not Macintosh. Like, oh man. Like, but I always found his accent kind of like his American accent is great in it. I never for a moment thought he was British. He takes over that version of Steve Jobs really well, where like I'm not looking at Michael Fassbender, I'm looking at this original character. But
yeah, and it's crazy too because he doesn't look remotely like Steve Jobs. Like there is zero similarities between him and Steve Jobs, other than the fact that they're both white. And yet he perfectly embodies. Like I kind of get why you guys were like, oh, Michael Fassbender for Best Actor. I'm like, you shitting me? But now I kind of get it because like he completely embodies the idea of Steve Jobs.
Right. While he does not look like Steve, it's like Frank Langella and Frost v. Nixon. He doesn't look or sound anything like Steve Jobs, but he's able to get all of the mannerisms down, all of the things, and he's able to make it like almost relatable. Like that weird scene where he goes into the bathroom and takes off his socks and sticks his feet in the toilet. Like I'm always like, that's such a weird thing to include. I'm glad it's in there. But like I'm like, that's so weird. But like it's kind of relatable. It's like, oh, he's getting prepared. Everyone has their like pre-game warm up.
Yeah.
No, Michael Fassbender's like he's really good. I think the line about Alan Turing is also like that always makes me crack up.
Oh yeah. He's like, it's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. It's like, and he's not going to be in the campaign just because you asked who he is.
Yeah, he's not going to. And that's Alan Turing. He invented the first modern computer, and he's not going to be in the campaign. Well, why isn't he in the campaign? Because you had to ask who he is. It's like, yeah, it makes sense. It's like, fuck. There's so much that I love about this movie. Fuck.
The other thing is that kind of annoyed me was all of his scenes with Jeff Daniels.
Oh, really?
Well, because like those are the most over the top, like, oh, you just got owned by Steve Jobs scenes. And then also like it's one of those things where it's like one very complicated person has their entire psychology explained in one sentence for the sake of plot convenience. Or for the sake of time. Like all his scenes with John Scully, it's like, John's like, why are you such a dick? Is it because you're adopted? And then later it's like, yeah, it's because I was adopted. And it's like, you said like, well, but you were chosen, so that means you weren't abandoned necessarily. And he's like, well, it's about control. And then later on, it's like, you see, it really was this, and that's why I'm such an asshole. It's like, how did you, like, for someone who it sounds like they're against therapy for one thing, that's an awful lot of insight to come up with in 2 seconds. As you talk to this one guy where you and John Scully only talk to each other once every like 10 years, right before every product launch.
Well, so all right, those are probably my favorite. Like consistently each cycle of the movie, his talks with John Scully are probably my favorite of the movie. It's also because that's where like the most development comes from, because like initially you see that like Steve Jobs wants to be John Scully, and then he wants to be everything John Scully is not, and then he kind of becomes his own person by the end when they happen. But the middle scene between him and John Scully is my favorite, because that's
the most over the top.
Oh, but that's the best one, where it's like why does everyone think that I fired Steve Jobs? And it's like, oh, okay, it is so easy for press manipulation to change it. It also like goes to, well, before I go on with this, how do you think the movie views Steve Jobs? Like where do you stand by it? And if you need like an example, I can tell you where I feel like it comes down on Steve Jobs.
Oh, I think it comes down on Steve Jobs the same way the Social Network comes down on, Mark Zuckerberg. It's like, it's the troubled genius. He's an asshole, but it's okay because he's really smart.
I feel like Mark Zuckerberg
Because he's really
had it a
smart
lot
and
worse.
he owns people.
Aaron Sorkin's dialogue. A lot of complex dialogue ending with the smart person owning the other person. We've distilled it down. It is. It really is.
That's every movie that's every script he's ever written. That's the entirety of The West Wing. It's some dude getting owned by the snarky guy. Or Martin Sheen. But yeah,
Martin Sheen owning everyone until like someone higher up than him, some Supreme Court justice owns him.
Yeah, it's exactly the Social Network. It's the troubled genius who's a complete dick to everyone around him, but we excuse it because he delivers sick burns.
I will say that this movie is. It's funny because I thought you were going to come down saying that this movie almost idolizes Steve Jobs, whereas with the Social Network, that movie just took Mark Zuckerberg and just like threw him in the dirt and drove for 50 miles like that.
But I think the Social Network idolizes Mark Zuckerberg in a way, and I think this movie idolizes Steve Jobs in a way, because it's like, it idolizes them almost because they're really smart assholes, not in spite of them being really smart assholes.
Yeah,
Because I think Aaron Sorkin has an affection for smart assholes.
I mean, I think he thinks he's a smart asshole. That's why.
Exactly. So I think the movie portrays these characters very negatively and then idolizes them anyway.
So I actually, because of the way that Steve Jobs owns everyone all the time and he talks with like this air of superiority, when I first watched it, I thought it was kind of idolizing him. But every time that I've watched it since then, it's like you realize that they have that. It's very. I say this all the time on the podcast. It takes a very critical stance on his egotism, because like it's really easy to think of like, oh yeah, Steve Jobs is like, oh, he's for the Apple elite. He's the man. He invented the iPhone. He invented the iMac. He brought Apple back from the brink. He bought Pixar. Blah blah blah. Like there's almost like this like sick fascination, like almost like a cult-like status that he has.
Well, I think it was Bill Burr who called him Nerd Jesus.
I mean,
and then went on to rant about how he didn't invent a damn thing.
What do you do, Steve? I played the orchestra. I'm like, that's probably a good summary of him, because I think that Sorkin was in a kind of a weird spot because he is such an Apple guy. Like he was in ads for the Power Mac back in back in the 90s. He's like, I write the West Wing on the Power Mac. So like he has a little bit
I use the disk drive to hold my cigarettes.
I used to use an iMac, now I use a Power Mac, and I can write words 25% faster thanks to the new Coke line that's on it. Like I feel like he came from a spot where he really idealized Steve Jobs, but then when it came to writing the movie, he tries to paint. They try to do kind of like a biased showing, because all of those shots of all of the like Apple obsessed people doing the wave, or like all of the Apple obsessed people like hanging over and drooling over everything Steve Jobs is about to present. I'm like, you guys clearly want to like put these people in their place. Like you want to provide
shots feel like very Danny Boyle-ish choices.
They do.
More so than
Aaron Sorkin. Right. And I think that's what Boyle brought to it, because I don't feel like you come away from the movie in the second act thinking Steve Jobs is a good human being. But by the end of the movie, a lot of the problems that he had, a lot of sort of his hang-ups have been tempered, and he's no longer that guy. Like the movie is all about bringing humility to a guy who's tried really hard to make it seem like he doesn't have any humility. Like the whole like, I'm not gonna, like the whole thing is like, we never start late. We never start late. And then the very obvious, it's all right, they can wait, it's Steve Jobs, they're gonna wait. Like I wasn't sure if that would be a moment where you would just like roll your eyes and groan.
Oh, I rolled my eyes super hard when he makes up with his daughter at the end, and it's like the most unearned like reconciliation in film history.
I don't think it's quite that bad, but I do. For a lot of it, I always hated that line of like when she's like, "Why didn't you tell me I was 5 years old? Why couldn't you tell me that Lisa was based off of me?" And he's just like,
"I'm poorly made."
Well, before that he's just like, "I don't know," and I'm like, "That's the biggest bullshit cop out you could think of." Aaron Sorkin, writer of genius dialogue, but.
Here's the thing. When he said "I don't know," that's like the one honest line in that whole scene.
And that's what I was gonna say. Is that like talking to you about it and like how you're like all of that pop psychology bullshit that pervades all of those talks with John Scully. Like it culminates in this moment where he's like, the guy who thinks he knows everything is like, I don't know why I'm an asshole. I keep trying to prove why I am. But really, the smart thing would just to be honest and be like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like so that's the realest moment in the whole movie where he gets asked like, "Why are you such a piece of shit?" And he's just like, "I don't know."
Well, actually, the real moment for me is like, Steve, you try so hard for people to hate you, and he's like, I don't care what people think of me, and he's just like, well, guess what? Michael Stuhlbarg from A Serious Man is just like, well, guess what? I don't like you. And I'm like, you know what, dude? I don't know why he stuck it out so long. By the way, Michael Stuhlbarg's character was probably my favorite character in the movie. I liked Andy. Poor Andy.
I actually really like Seth Rogen's Steve Wozniak.
He's really good. The moment at the end of the movie, that's my second favorite moment is at the end of the movie when Seth Rogen's like, acknowledge the Apple II team. Like that whole conversation where they're like shouting back and forth on the stage. No, he's really good in the movie.
There's a weird edit at the very end of the movie where it's like doing all the lights flashing and he's out on stage. And there's a really quick cut to the garage where, you know, young Steve Jobs, which is just 40-year-old Michael Fassbender with long hair, is, you know, pacing outside of the garage. And from inside you hear Wozniak go, "Steve." And then it cuts back, and that's it. It's just this really quick insert almost of the garage. And I'm like, wait, what was that? Which also, I feel like that is a very Danny Boyle thing.
That is a Danny Boyle thing. Well, I want to talk about Steve Wozniak's watch so badly, but
it's a really stupid watch.
that seemed like a very Aaron Sorkin thing. Like, look at this technology. It's great. It's going to be, in the next 20 years, it's going to be the hot new thing. And then, of course, you know, Steve Jobs has to own him. That was actually the moment that I really hated. It was like, hey, change the time. Okay, let me just take out this tool here, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, Aaron Sorkin's trying to show that he's smarter than you. You thought that this thing was cool? Well, guess what? It's stupid. I was like, all right, I don't like that.
That's the thing. There's so much of... Like, Aaron Sorkin's script is great because the dialogue is great, and his script is annoying because there's so many moments where you can see what he's trying to set you up for.
Yeah.
You know, well, there's a lot of pop psychology bullshit, but there's also a lot of, like, oh, here we go. He's setting up another, yep, so-and-so just got owned by Steve Jobs. It's just, you know, that gets a little tiresome. That gets extremely tiresome, actually. That's the one thing that I think holds this movie back the most is, like, it's such an Aaron Sorkin movie, so everything that's great about it is what's great about Sorkin, and everything that is annoying about it is what's annoying about Sorkin.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say I really like how it seems that Danny Boyle changes, like... Was this film shot digitally?
Okay. I'm so glad you brought this up. So,
because like 1984, it's got
shot
that
on
like
film.
Fake film grain type.
It was actually shot on film.
No, it actually is shot on film. Okay.
Yeah, 1984 was shot on film.
1998 shot digitally.
1998 was shot with top of the line. Yep. And then 1988 was shot with older digital cameras.
Okay.
Yep.
So I thought that was really cool.
It helped to differentiate each style. It also, like, by setting each one in a different location, because in reality, everything he did was at the Flynn Center.
Yeah.
Which, again, another reason I like it. I'm a NorCal guy. They shot the whole thing up in... They went to Cupertino to shoot that opening section in the 80s. They went, they shot everything. As far as I know, they shot everything in Northern California. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I wish I were there to be an extra, but I'm like, I recognize the Flynn Center. I've set foot inside the same place that Steve Jobs and Michael Fassbender set foot in. That's cool. But like, but I also, I'm not sure if this is a Danny Boyle thing or if this is an Aaron Sorkin thing or if it's just a perfect melding. But I love all of the cutbacks and the all of the cross cutting to like past times, like when he's talking with Steve Wozniak in 1984 about like we should have more ports, we should have less ports, we should have more ports,
and then it cuts to the garage.
Yeah, like
and when he's talking to John Scully
stuff
at the end, and it cuts back to his dad's restaurant.
Yeah. Well, also when he's talking to John Scully in the middle, and it cuts back to the quorum. Like that, I think that's the real reason I love that scene is because I like how they're like the internal politics of what happened there. And like how Steve Jobs is like, oh, like I'm going to try and, usurp John Scully, but no one else likes me on the board. But and because of that, I ultimately undid myself. And the whole like plot to have next is just like a giant red herring for him to just get back into the seat of Apple. Like that's why I really like that section of the movie. Even though I can see how that could kind of be annoying for people. And also the fact that they have those...
I do like all the cross-cutting.
The cross-cutting is... Also, for some reason in that
Given that I've forced you to edit one of my shorts, you know how much I love cross-cutting.
Well, it's not just that it's like cross-cutting done well, but like part of it has to be scripted, I'm guessing, because like they're talking in those scenes. And so, like, part of me wants to get my hands on the screenplay, but for other reasons, because, like, I love structurally how it's, like, the same thing happens over and over and over again every time, even to the point of, like, the people he's interacting with at that moment are almost always the same people.
I know.
In order.
One thing I also thought was kind of funny is, a lot of movies will, a character has a mysterious past that's teased at, and then you get the revelation at the end. It's funny how many times in this movie that convention is sort of turned on its head, where like nothing is ever teased at, but you get the revelations anyway. like
his father.
Like his father is the guy at the restaurant. Like that just comes out of nowhere, and it's this big shock to John Scully, but the audience has no idea because it's a flashback that we saw 2 seconds ago, and then it's like, oh, and by the way, the guy in the flashback is my biological father. And John Scully's like, oh my god, that revelation has shook my world to the core. And then meanwhile, the audience is like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Wow, so he knew his father the whole time. Also, the other thing I like the way the movie does is the way that it tells the history of the characters and like other aspects of the characters without explicitly having to state it. So like we're talking about going back in time to the garage, or the fact that Steve Jobs was a vegetarian / vegan. Like there's a lot of little references there.
Yeah.
And I was like, I appreciated that way, because it's, again, I like seeing unique things in movies, and that's part of the structure of it. That's part of the uniqueness of the movie, was like it was not a straightforward telling of Steve Jobs' life, unlike some other movies that have been made.
Yeah, I also like the way that his relationship with the, Kate Winslet's character is built through just their interaction. There's not a whole lot of, there's like no exposition with them, except for the end when she like monologues about how frustrated she is with him. And that again, because their relationship is built up just purely through action, and then there's this big exposition dump via emotional monologue at the end that felt really out of place.
You must make it up with Lisa. I have watched you many times, been your boardroom member. Do you remember that one time? Yes, I remember that one time.
You're tearing me apart, Lisa.
Oh my god! I think the thumbnail just wrote itself. Oh man! Oh my god! Anyway. Oh man. Yeah. You were saying.
I don't know.
Oh my god.
One thing I wanted to say is, that shooting the movie on 3 different types of cameras, I thought that was really neat. And it's funny because when I first started the movie, it's like, wow, the visuals in this movie are really noisy. Like, what? Like, was this? Did they? Because that's why I thought it was shot on digital. Because it's like, did they shoot this on digital and then slap like heavy film grain on it, which they're then later going to remove? So that's what I thought they did. I thought the whole thing was shot on digital, and they just inserted like the most heavy-handed film grain for the first chapter. But yeah, I guess it was actually shot on like 8mm film.
I think it was 16.
I know, it was 16. 8mm. Like 16mm is that film stock where it's like...
You can tell it's super grainy.
Yeah, it's kind of grody looking, but it's not like some garbage 1970s home movie type of gross.
It's like that's it, the extra 8mm were just like on the side to make sure it's widescreen. Real nerdy film joke there. Anyway, yeah, I like the visual look of it. I don't like to think about how much coverage he actually had to shoot in order to get it to move from moment to moment.
Don't think about it, Matt.
But also like the fact that like, so in the West Wing there's obviously a lot of like shots of people talking and moving from like one place to another, but those are isolated scenes. What it was nice about this was like, I think Danny Boyle was like, all right, I have to keep it fresh. So he kept moving Steve Jobs around from like point A to point B and having people talk to him there. But then also like, it was an easy way to integrate other people that he had to talk to as well. So just from a staging point of view, it seems like it would have been a nightmare to shoot, but he does it so flawlessly, which I think adds to the fact that the movie to me doesn't feel like 2 hours. I think it's about 2 hours. It doesn't feel like 2 hours. And part of that is because each segment's only about like 45 minutes, if that. So it's almost like watching 3 episodes of like a half-hour TV show about Steve Jobs.
Yeah, everything's very fast-paced.
But also part of it's because it's always constantly moving in interesting directions.
Yeah, because instead of having these long takes of walking and talking, it is a lot of people just in a room, but they're always like circling each other and stuff. Like they're never still, they're never just sitting in a chair. So yeah, I can imagine blocking those scenes just being a fucking nightmare because you're having like a 10-minute conversation in a room and both people are constantly just walking back and forth, picking up things, throwing things, looking in the mirror and all this stuff. No one is ever still for very long, except your favorite scene with John Scully.
Yeah, where they're just standing and talking.
They both stand completely still in a dramatically like empty room.
Hey, not dramatically empty, all right? All of the chairs are turned up on the tables.
Again, it's like conspicuously empty. It's like, I don't know, that feels like a theater thing. It's like, this empty room is a metaphor for the emptiness of the soul or something.
These chairs are turned on the tables to show that Steve Jobs is completely closed to the rest of the world. Speaking of pop culture, pop psychology bullshit. But again, like that's the distillation of like these two corporate giants just like ready to go head to head.
Yeah.
And of course Steve Jobs attempting to own him at the end, which I don't think he does. You were just trying to sell flavored sugar water. Okay.
Yeah, his sick burn at the end of that scene is not so sick, even though it's the most played up out of all of them in the movie, I would say.
Yeah. Well, the moment I think is like when because they have all through that section they have like half of Michael Fassbender's face staring at a camera. That's where it gets the most Danny Boyle-y. Where they're like intercutting, where they're cross-cutting modern and past, and like impressionistic Michael Fassbender looking at the camera and slowly lowering his head. That's why I love that scene so much. It's so film art house artsy fartsy, but it's so good.
It's definitely Danny. It's got that, Hi, I'm Danny Boyle, and I made a movie about heroin just by running around the streets of Glasgow with a camera. Like,
can I apply the heroin to Steve Jobs' life? Yeah, I don't know, but like the movie moves at such a good pace. I think also some of the things that you find are problems with the movie are things that I like about the movie. Mm-hmm. Like I like Aaron Sorkin's obsession with having our super smart main character own everyone, while at the same time having our super smart main character who owns everyone have a comeuppance over and over again in the last act. Like I really appreciate that. Especially in those times where it's like he's trying to like get the upper hand on people, like when Andy's leaving and he's like, "I never liked you," and he's like, "Huh, I always liked you. How about that?" Like it's just such a like a moment where you're like you look. It cuts back to Michael Stuhlbarg and it's like, did he really like him, or did he really? You know, it's like I like that. Like if he liked me so much, why did he threaten my whole career prospects? You know, like. I don't know. I like all of that. I like the fact I think that the fact that it's always right before the launch and there's always some sort of catastrophic problem that he can't overcome. The problem becomes less and less like catastrophic as the movie goes. So like in 1984, it's like it needs to say hello, and if it doesn't say hello, I'm going to kill everyone. To like at the end of the movie, it's like this isn't the right shark. Like that's the big conflict they're gonna have is. It's not the right picture of a shark eating a computer, and
no, the big conflict is his daughter hates him.
Well, he
needs to.
But that's not the conference conflict. Like that's like the whole movie is like though. Steve Jobs hates his daughter, and like he then needs to learn to love her properly, like admit that it's his daughter or whatever. Mm-hmm. But for the keynote address or whatever, like it's not like the Mac isn't gonna work. They're like, oh yeah, the Mac works because Macs work because it's a Macintosh, you know. Like that's the one thing that got under my skin is like this obsession with like Macintosh is the greatest computer, which you know I'm not gonna say one way or another. It's also funny. Sorry, go ahead. You're gonna say something.
Oh no! Wow, that was a very Sixth Sense of you.
I heard a tick.
No, I was just going to say, I think the idea is that, you know, the modern age of comprehensible computers is sort of being attributed to the Macintosh, where it's like, before the Macintosh, computers were only to be used by like specialists who understood how they worked and had very deep technical knowledge, because you needed that to actually do anything
for the Apple II.
For the Apple II or IBM's computers or anything at that time. And what the movie's trying to say is like, well, you know, and then when Steve Jobs came along, his revolutionary idea was that anyone should be able to use a computer. So like, you know, the whole thing with the Macintosh, it's like it's so easy this 5-year-old child could paint a picture on it.
Right.
Which is like, I mean, you see that today with like the phone debates, you know, people.
That's right.
Like a lot of Samsung, a lot of people use like Samsung phones. Like, well, you know, the Samsung, it's more powerful, or maybe this model has a better camera than the iPhone, and you know, it's like, yeah, that's all true. And then they'll, you know, try to do something, and the UI is a disaster, and they're like, wait, what? It's like, what do you mean, wait, what? This is your phone. You should know how to use it.
As a Samsung user, I've never really run into too many problems, but I do agree with you about like usability and something like that. Well, that and like, you know, the computer should be a work of art. Like this thing could go, you know, this thing should be in the Smithsonian or whatever, or in the MoMA. The one thing I found kind of ironic about the movie was like they have that one part where like Apple stock is tanking because they have a failure to innovate. And I was like, Steve Jobs. They brought Steve Jobs back to innovate, and then like I feel like modern Mac, as like after Steve Jobs has died, modern Mac is like starting to stumble into the same problem that Apple stumbled into back in like
it's hilarious,
the late '80s.
Well, it's funny. Their stock tanked because they weren't innovating. Now they're not innovating, but their stock almost doubled in 2019.
I don't get it. Well, but see, their stock started to tank like 10 years. I mean, like it took, according to the movie's timeline, it took 10 years for Steve Jobs to get from Next back to Apple.
Mm-hmm.
That's, so we'll see what happens in the future but iPhone sales in the United States, they cornered the market early and they continue to have like a stranglehold in the United States. And because it is a closed system, it does make it a lot better as far as like the phone technology goes. So
yeah. And then outside of the U.S., it's all Samsung and Huawei.
Yeah, it's Samsung, Huawei. Everything runs on Android, but Android's like the Windows of phones. Like people can hack them super easily, so it makes them kind of questionable.
Well, the other problem with Windows is that it doesn't work,
or the fact that it's still on C++.
I know. That's the thing with Windows. It's like, for whatever reason, it's the problem they've never been able to fix. It just inexplicably stops working.
I mean, I think it's the not to say that movie Steve Jobs is right, but like part of the problem is that it's such an open system that it's easy for people who want to crash the system to find a way to crash the system.
Yeah.
It's really easy to make things to make open-ended ends of lines of code that will inevitably crash your computer. Whereas like with Apple, everything has to be, Apple runs on Unix now, so it's on a much more stable system. But also Apple can only run things specifically made for Apple, especially like in the mid 90s and 2000s. That market's opened up significantly over the last 10 years, 20 years now. But the last thing I'll say about the movie is like, anytime I think of 98 and they show that old, now old iMac, and like I'm kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. It looks great. And someone makes a joke about it looking like the microwave from the Jetsons, and I kind of find that funny. But it makes me remember those old Gateway commercials from 1998. Like, hey man, you want a Gateway computer? Everyone's buying a computer. Get a Gateway.
Oh,
that's
man.
My nostalgia bubble.
That line where he's like, it's like, and the new Mac will be is optimized for the function that everyone is going to want to use it for. And it's like, what's that? The internet.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, remember when no one knew what the fuck the internet was? And like you had to get on the internet, you had to buy like a fucking coffee table book with a CD inside from AOL when it was spelled out, when it was actually called America Online, not just AOL. And then you had to put the CD in your computer, and it had to calibrate your computer for the internet. And then you're like, now that I am on America Online, I can check my emails and send messages to people who also have America Online.
Hey man, America Online for a long time, closed internet system. 56K modem. I love it how he opens up the port and he's just like, 56K modem, like, boom, that's the thing. 56K modem, like, no DSL, no cable connections, 56K modem. And they're talking about the specs of the computer, and it's like, that is so pathetic. We have something, like, we've had things in our pockets for 10 years that are more powerful than those first computers, and then even the iMac. Like, it's crazy. It's just funny how like the arms race of computer tech and Moore's law and everything like that happened.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I wonder how far Moore's law can go, because I wonder if there's like a physical limitation to how much computer technology can advance before it just kind of like, well, it turns out it's not infinite. You can only do so much with sand.
Oh man. So I was reading a book called Future Crimes, and it talks all about that kind of stuff, about like Moore's law. That was its main thing. It's like, oh, because of Moore's law, blah blah blah. And I'm like, Moore's law is still kind of theoretical. It shouldn't really be called Moore's law. It should be more like Moore's conjecture. Moore's hypothesis. But like, he talks about smart objects, and I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but they talk about like, everyone's talking about like, oh yeah, your toothbrush is connected to the internet, to which the next question is, why would I want my toothbrush connected to the internet? To which they answer, oh, because then your toothbrush can tell you what diseases you have like it'll tell you that you're about to get a cold before you know you're about to get a cold, and everyone's like, that's amazing, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. So
that way Skynet can use your toothbrush to poison you.
Yeah, they can use your toothbrush to poison you. They can like infect you with a cavity. But he brings up this point of like the guy who wrote Future Crimes, who I should really attribute. He brings up this point of like, hey, you remember when your washing machine didn't need a firmware update? And like with that simple line, I was like, wow, I really am scared of the Internet of Things. Like, why would my washing machine need to be connected to the internet to look up how to wash all of my clothes properly? Like, most people don't know how to do that anyway, but I don't think connecting my washing machine to the internet. So Moore's Law is going to come to a head when we finally have smart toilet paper. That's where I'm drawing the line. Smart toilet paper.
See, that's the thing. I feel like there's a physical limitation to what we can do, because it's like, how are you supposed to wipe your ass with a computer chip? Like, wouldn't that be insanely painful?
So you would think that my problem is like when the toilet paper just decides to lock up because it didn't get a firmware update, and then you really have to wipe your ass with something, and like your computer controlled bidet is screwed because that thing's fucked. But no, the chips are getting so small, like you said, a grain of sand. Like they're going to be able to print like foldable computer chips soon that you wipe your ass and it tells you that that you should probably lay off the Doritos at night. Like, no, I don't need my whole house to be connected to the internet. No. I don't need my freaking cups to tell me that my beverage isn't hot enough, or that I need to buy more Coca-Cola. Like, I'm good. Thank you, Steve Jobs. I blame you.
Everyone is to blame.
It's true. That's true. The Jetsons most of all. Let's be honest.
That's the weird thing. It's always like, it seems like everyone's idea for here's where the world should go in terms of technology always seems to come from pop culture. It's always like science fiction leads the way, and then we're just catching up to whatever sci-fi thing someone thought was cool.
Yeah. I know it's kind of strange, but imagine if we didn't have that, where would we be? Like if you don't have the people who can imagine crazy new things, then we're just going to all have like smart toilet paper. So
that's the world we're living in right now, man. What are you talking about?
I mean, yeah, but like I'm glad that they developed things like I don't know, like video chat, which is kind of cool, but didn't work nearly as well as it did in 2001: A Space Odyssey with that awkward little girl. It was like, "Hey, Daddy," and he's like, "Oh my God, how am I supposed to act on this?" But like I don't know, like I think it's kind of cool how like we have electric vehicles that can get to the point where they self-park. Like all of this stuff is pretty cool, but I do agree with you. It's like it's funny how the people who are like seen as the innovators are basically just reading science fiction from the 1960s and not following the science fiction from the 1960s through to the end where the robots kill everyone.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like, if you wonder if that is the case, where most of our technological innovations are coming from people imitating science fiction, we seem to be reaching a point where science fiction is now kind of folding back, and it's like people have lost the ability to imagine new futures. Everything's just about nostalgia and looking backwards now. So if all the new science fiction is obsessed with the past, what is our future going to look like?
Probably like Back to the Future Part 2, where it's just kind of like it's like 50s inspired 80s. I don't know.
That sounds terrible.
Plastic ties. The only thing I can think of is that like there's going to be a new brand of, one of two things. One, there's going to be a new brand of science fiction writers who are going to try and like get back ahead of the curve. Like people who are like, basically they're going to watch a lot of like giant robot anime and use that as like the benchmark of like, this is where we're going to go from here. The other thing I can think of is that like these giant companies that are trying to revolutionize everything are just going to bring a bunch of people, probably a bunch of like not really inventive bean counters, into a room as a think tank and just say, like, where should we go from here? What can we innovate? What can we do? And if the end result is like, oh, well, we should recreate all of our houses to look like something out of the 1960s, then maybe we'll be in trouble. But I mean, like, there's always something in the world that could use better innovation. Not necessarily like technology, like my computer needs better things, but like basic human needs.
Yeah.
And so I'd hope that that's where technology would go to, is to find cheaper ways to make sure everyone can get what they need.
Yeah. Either that or someone's going to be like, hey, you know Neon Genesis Evangelion? Yeah. Let's make all the shit from that show.
That's what we want. We finally have a way to make the armor plating from Gundam. That's what we're going to do. Hey, I mean, I would almost be down for giant robot battles too.
It'll be giant robots and cicadas everywhere. Yeah, I was thinking the other day, like, the one trope that is maybe consistent across all anime ever throughout history is that, like, Yasujiro Ozu establishing shot of a location with no people in it. It's just like a painting, and and cicada noises playing over it. That's in every anime I've ever seen. I don't know why. I don't know why that's a trope, but it is a trope.
That's just like all of the rain sounds in anime are always they're just lifted from Rashomon.
Exactly.
Also, I mean, it's partially that, like, it's a cultural thing, but also the people who are like putting out those things, it's probably really cheap to do because like the cicada noise is probably public domain, and just like having a painting that someone already did, hold on it for like 20 seconds, it's like, yeah, okay, budget cut in half already. So
I guarantee you the cicada noise is public domain because it's the exact same cicada noise in every anime.
Hey man, those Japanese studios, they need to produce a lot of content and they need to make it cheap, man. So, I mean, you know where I stand on Steve Jobs. I know where you stand. It's funny because I think we differ in like such, like, we both agree it's really good, but where I feel like it's elevated is where you feel like it's a detraction.
Exactly.
But that's good. That's fine. It made me think about it. I never realized that Aaron Sorkin's movies were all about ownage before. So it's a nice change.
Aaron Sorkin, the king of ownage.
And then NBC fired him.
Yep.
So who really got owned? Apparently NBC did, because the last couple seasons of The West Wing were not very good. Apparently.
When was the last time network television had a good TV show? The Good Place? Never seen it. If it's on network TV, I just automatically assume it's trash.
That would probably be where, like, I didn't watch The Good Place all the way through, but it kind of like went in a different direction than a lot of TV shows.
Yeah, I've heard that, like, people really love that show.
Yeah, it's a very smart show, and it's also a very concise show. I think every season's only like 12 episodes long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's and each episode's only a half an hour, so every episode is really packed, and like the way that season 2 starts is kind of like that Rian Johnson subverting expectations thing, where it's like where you thought they were going to go in season 2 is very different than where they ultimately decided to go. Not necessarily a ringing endorsement for me. I enjoy it, but I also didn't watch it all the way through to the end. It talks a lot about philosophical theory as well, which I think is what a lot of people got in on. So
that's neat.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strange stuff on TV these days. Like, God, what was that one? There's like God Friended Me or something.
Yeah, I
on
didn't.
CBS.
I didn't watch
in
that.
In fairness to the other networks, CBS is definitely the worst. Like they're only capable of making absolute dog shit, it seems like. They've just been on a cold streak for as long as I can remember, where at least the other networks will put out something like respectable.
The one thing about CBS is that CBS is all about giving very similar, very bland, but very like palatable shows and that's how it wins in ratings. It's able to kind of capture the very old audience and sort of the middle audience, and so they make those kinds of shows because those shows keep bringing them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Which is the oddest thing to me.
I know. Well, I think CBS is the biggest practitioner of television as it was originally conceived, which is background noise for people doing housework.
Correct. I would agree with that. I there's still quite a lot of that in modern television. There's a reason why everyone's like, oh, television's a writer's medium, because the writers in television tend to write somewhat circular dialogue. But I would say that CBS is the kind of show where if you watch the very beginning of the show, you watch the very end of the show, and you don't watch anything in the middle, you still get everything you need.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Any last thoughts about Steve Jobs?
No, not really. I mean, it's a good movie. I can see why you like it so much.
Yeah, it's actually, like, after rewatching it again, I was almost like, was there a better movie that year? But was that the same year as Mad Max Fury Road?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go. It's like, even though I've seen Steve Jobs a lot, I still, like, it's funny that those two movies came out in the same year, and they're both so fantastic. Like, it makes me think, man, that was a really good year. And then what won for Best Picture again?
Fucking Spotlight, dude.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good place to end this one. You have anything else to add?
Not really. Well, one thing I was going to say is I feel like Spotlight came out at the wrong time. Like, it almost would have made more sense if it came out 2 years later. Because I feel like ever since Trump's been in office and traditional media is more under attack now than it was, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Because 6 years ago, it was under attack for being just stuffy and outdated. And now it's under attack for, like, every reason under the sun. Mainly because just the president doesn't like it. There's so many movies coming out where it's like, like The Post or whatever, where it's so in your face about, like, journalism is important. Meh. And it's it's like, yeah, journalism is important. It's a shame that all the major news outlets don't practice it anymore. Like, you can't honestly look at the New York Times and call what they do journalism. So
I mean, when everything's under the banner of the Associated Press, it's like, are the journalists actually doing anything?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. The only people who seem to be doing any kind of real journalism anymore are the Associated Press, because it's just journalists on their own doing shit, and then they write a story about it.
I mean, I think it'd be really interesting to, like, see a movie about how the internet kind of, like, blew up and destroyed the traditional ways that we consume media and news coverage, because, like, I'm guessing one of the reasons why newspapers and everything, like, why the whole quality and standard has gone down is just because it's hard to compete when, even on, like, CNN, like, on CNN, you have to wait for them to talk about the story you want them to talk about, which means waiting through an awful lot of Wolf Blitzer blitzing about nothing.
Tell me about it.
Whereas with the internet, you can just immediately go to what you want to see. So, like, it's kind of not talked about nearly as much, and I'm sure there's some movie out there about it, but, like, I feel like I don't know. I feel like it'd be interesting to see a very depressing movie about how the internet just completely crippled all of the jobs at Spotlight. Pretty much.
I don't know, man, because I feel like there's still a market for that sort of thing. It's like
for the newspaper.
Well, no, for real news, like real Everyone's like, we can't do real investigative journalism anymore because no one wants to fund it. And it's like, well, people who don't want to fund it are idiots, because the market's out there for it. Everyone is so cynical about the media these days because the media sucks. And, if the media actually did their jobs, if they actually invested in these things that they claim they can't invest in anymore, I guarantee you people would buy it.
It's a similar scenario to, like, when you look at schools and it's like, oh, all, middle schools and high schools care about is math and science. And it's like, You know what would be great if we introduced auto body shop? It'd be great if we introduced home economics, because you know how many people don't know how to do their laundry? Like, no amount of smart laundry machines are going to teach you how to do your own laundry. So, like, it's like we sacrifice, like, you sacrifice the investigative journalism. Well, guess what? Investigative journalism, which is more alive in podcast form now, like, a lot of that is kind of done that way. But even then, like, that's still a lot of money, time, and research that goes into it.
Yeah.
It sucks that newspapers themselves are having a hard time with circulation rates, and I'm curious to see if it will have like a trend like books where everyone was reading e-books and then they decided to go back to physical media. I'm wondering if people are gonna like come to the realization that like in their slowing life in the morning, it's sometimes better to just have a newspaper than to just like go on Google News and just refresh the page for the whole day.
Well, I think the bigger thing is people will still go on Google News and refresh the page for the day, but I think on really important issues or really big stories, people are going to want like a massive in-depth article about, you know, some political situation or about, you know, some big scandal or whatever, you know, something that's very well researched and sourced and all that stuff.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like some 80 billion year old politician clapped back at another 80 billion year old politician about the minutia of some stupid social issue that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, which will shock you, you know.
Their reactions will blow your mind. I mean, I don't know, like I think there might be a passion for it, but I also think that the way that people perceive how the markets work, one, is wrong. I think you'd agree with me on that. Yeah. But also, like, it's amazing and it's frustrating what companies decide are worth investing in and what they decide are not.
Yeah, I think we're in a situation where a lot of media organizations have given up on doing their job or doing what they should do. And then a lot of the stuff about, oh, you have to do clickbait, or you have to do this, you know, investigate. We can't invest in investigative journalism anymore. I think those are just excuses they're giving themselves so they don't feel as bad about the fact that they've given up.
I agree with that. Well, on that depressing note, well, I guess we've decided to throw the media under the wheels this time as well.
Yeah, because fuck the media.
Oh man! Oh wow!
They're terrible, man. There's reading news is an exercise in frustration because it's like it's
talk about burying the lead.
It's something that's very serious that gets downgraded to be, you know, an afterthought almost. Yeah. Or they put as much effort into it as you would into an afterthought.
I want to talk about it more, but I don't have the time. We should. Okay. I'm wondering if we'll ever make our way back to this topic because I think it's really fascinating. But
probably will. I mean, if we ever throw another, you know, based on a true story movie under the wheels, or or if anything,
Oscar season comes around.
Oscar season comes around, or if there's weird media coverage of some Disney movie, and I want to rant about how terrible the media is again, we can do that.
That sounds good. That could work. Let's see what's coming out soon. Let's see. We'll get back to this topic. We'll definitely get back to it.
Oh, you know what? Here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna make a prediction right now.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna predict Black Widow's gonna come out. It'll be a perfectly fine movie, like most Marvel movies are. Mm-hmm. It's not gonna do super well at the box office because people, like, after Endgame, they're kind of done. They're ready to move on. So then, to drive box office receipts, Disney's going to start bitching about social justice stuff. The media's going to clamp onto it and push that narrative, and then it'll do better in like weeks 3, 4, and 5. That's my prediction.
I'll take. I think it's going to go in an opposite direction. I think it's going to do really well because people are going to be kind of a little bit nostalgic for like the time before Endgame, and then the subsequent movies that'll start coming out will not do well. But I also agree that there is going to be some story related to gender on it.
Oh, I guarantee it.
100%.
Because that's what...
like, oh, the box office is still huge, proving women-led superhero movies can make money. It's just that Birds of Prey didn't have good blah, blah, blah. Which it didn't.
Yeah, I see it going one of two ways. It's like... Actually, oh no, I see it only going one way. I think Black Widow's is gonna underperform expectations because it's not that big a deal. And it's... Like I said, people are kind of... I think a lot of people are kind
ready
of
to
done
check
with
out.
Marvel after Endgame. They feel they have closure for that whole franchise, so they don't feel the need to go back and dive in again for this solo movie, even if the movie's good. And then I think because of that, they're gonna somehow make it about gender because it's female lead, mostly female characters. And you'd be like, well, is the reason that Black Widow isn't doing as well as other Marvel movies is because everyone is sexist.
And then the other half of the internet is going to be, Black Widow would have been better if Black Widow was a man.
Someone will say that. Even though that makes no sense, someone will say it. But yeah, I think it's just going to be like, they're going to blame kind of the economics of the movie business on gender or some bullshit like that. We'll see.
I'm gonna end with this here. I'm wondering, because Florence Pugh has generally been in really good movies. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if this is either going to be a really good movie and it's going to continue her hit streak, or if this is going to be her first not so good movie. Ooh, that's what I'm kind of curious about. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious where that stands. Like, because it seems like she might be doing it for the money and the exposure, but who knows? She might really like the script. So.
We'll see.
Anything else?
No, just follow us on Facebook. Subscribe. Our podcast is on iTunes. Or I guess it's Apple Podcasts now.
Oh yeah, it is. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's also
on Spotify.
It might be on Spotify. I have to check. I think it's also on Stitcher.
Okay.
So
be sure to leave us a rating and a review. Very important for spreading the word. And our website is underthewheelspodcast.wix. I don't know what the website is.
I never know what the website is.
But just go to Facebook because it is linked to the website.
It does have a link to the website, and feel free to also email us at underthewheelspodcast at gmail.com. We'd love to get some email, potentially read it online, not live on the air because we're not live. So,
read it on the podcast, and then you can hear it like 3 weeks later.
3 weeks later? You mean like a month later? Oh man! All right, well that's it. We put that thing to bed. My name is Matthew.
I'm Gabe,
and you've just been under the wheels. Oh, shoot! Hit the wrong.
Ramirez, you crazy Spanish peacock.
Finished.